there's a mosquito. I can see it. It just went by. I've been attacked by mosquitoes. I don't know about you, but bugs find me and they just, I mean, that's not a good sight. But yeah, mosquitoes. What are we going to do about it? Hey, ScouterStan. I'll tell you what, mosquitoes are one of those things that can really make your camping challenging. There are certain times of the year and different places that have populations of mosquitoes. They are out there, and there's ways we can kind of mitigate a lot of that and actually get our scouts to have fun despite all of the buzzing and all of those kinds of things. Even flies. I know that when I lived up in New England, mayflies were, and they came out and they would take a chunk out of you. They were bad. They were like horseflies that you see. So you have to be careful with those. I can remember a lot of camping trips where I was just, chewed on by the bugs. And that can be very aggravating. Now Mike, my good friend, was asking this question. And what do you do? What can you do? A lot of times you have to think about the season, but the time that you go camping is usually the time that they're in their prime. So, and that's something you have to think about. Keep that in mind when you're thinking about the insect population from wherever you're going. And it can be shocking if you're going from a northern climb to a more moderate climb, say in the upper portion of the South, in the United States. That is, that climate difference can really be different as far as mosquito population, different mosquitoes that are out there, different flying, biting things like horseflies and the mayflies and all those different things that take a chunk off you. That's not good. So you have to keep that in mind when you're traveling, doing camping. So you have to think about where you're going and where you're going to be staying for a week or more. So make sure that you are prepared. Be prepared. Now the mosquito is one of those insects that's needed for the big picture. There's a lot of other animals that rely on the mosquitoes for food. That's their food. They eat them. So those animals that are out there eating the mosquitoes, they need to be in that balance. You need to keep them in balance. But inevitably, you're going to have, at one point, mosquitoes are very tenacious. And they will go a little bit above, there'll be a little more food than what can be kept in check. So bats and all the different animals that eat mosquitoes, they need to be encouraged to grow and thrive and have a habitat. That's very important for that system to be there, to keep it in check. If you have too many bats, you won't have enough food. If you have not enough bats, you may not have enough, there'll be too many mosquitoes, and you have to keep that in mind. There's a lot of nasty things that come from mosquitoes. Anything that's going to puncture your skin and actually pull blood out and put spit into the body, that bug is something that we have to be very careful of, and make sure that if you're bitten by a mosquito, there's treatments. And you want to make sure that you're not getting some of the really nasty stuff that could really be bad. There's malaria, and you name it. There's a lot of different things that mosquitoes can carry. And this is true for like Lyme disease. I had no idea that some mosquito species could actually do that. Zika, there's a ton of things that the mosquitoes can actually infect scouts and scouters with, and all you want to do is go canoeing. It can be very frustrating. So you're there, okay? You're gonna have mosquitoes. They're there. Some mosquito species, the female that actually does the biting, doesn't make any sound. It's the males that make sound. So you don't even know they're there. They're very sneaky, and they come and they get you. Well, let's mitigate it. Let's start getting your scouts ready. If they're going to go to an area where mosquitoes are everywhere, get them ready for it. In some places, it may be required to wear long sleeve shirts, regular trousers. Make sure that all the surfaces of your skin are covered. I've even seen people wear masks or beekeeper helmets. I've seen that with the screens and stuff. It depends on how bad it is. But if you can decrease the amount of surface space that the mosquitoes can land on and actually drill in, that's something you need to do. Now, there's also a lot of repellents, and they're chemical based, and they're to prevent the mosquitoes from actually finding you. A lot of times it's with your breath. You can actually, the mosquito is looking for the fragrance of what they want, and they search through the air and they actually find you. So if you can disrupt that by using something like a mosquito repellent, that is wonderful. And that disrupts that hunting nature that they have to get you. And if you can disrupt that, you will decrease the amount. It's not going to get 100%. Decrease the amount of exposure and biting. That's so important. Now I've seen sprays, and I've seen aerosols and all that stuff. I've even seen Off, I believe, has that's a brand name, that has this little contraption that runs with a little fan that actually creates a cloud or a fragrance in the air that the bugs don't want to be near. It's a repellent. They go the other direction. And that way they're not hunting you down, smelling the air going, ooh, there's lunch. You know, those repellents actually help. Now, whenever possible, you want to choose a campsite that's away from any standing water. The larvae stage, after the female lays their eggs and so on, the larvae stage has to be in water. That's where they go. So any standing water, say a swamp or something that's accurate, that's just sitting there, those are breeding grounds for mosquitoes. Now, a lot of people say go in there and take those out. Well, there's fish and animals that rely on that larvae as a food source. That's what you need to do. So that you want to stay away from when you're camping. The worst thing you can do is put your tent up in mosquito central. No matter how much propellant you have, how much full clothes, keeping them away from you, they're going to come after you. Now, another one is to stay away from really thick vegetation. If you have undergrowth, and that could be a breeding ground for a lot of mosquitoes. So you just want to stay away from that opportunity for them to invade. You keep that in mind. If you could stay away from the standing water and any kind of vegetation that's real thick, that helps. Now, when you're camping and you're trying to evade the mosquito, you want to make sure that your new scouts know that when they come out of the tent, as soon as they're out, they need to zip the tent back up. That netting keeps the insects from getting into the tent. If you leave the door open, they're going to come right through. So close the tents. Keep them closed as much as possible. The netting should be up there too as a barrier. That is very important. Now, a lot of southern campers will actually have mosquito nets over their sleeping area. Nothing worse than, especially if it's a warm night, than to have that mosquito constantly coming in biting you. That netting just eliminates that completely. It keeps you, it's a barrier, keeps you away from them getting on you. I've even had that over my sleeping area and woke up the next morning with mosquitoes all over it. So you're just sitting there banging on, and they go flying off in every direction. So they can be intense, and I could just imagine if that wasn't there, how many would have visited and made a meal of me. So not good, not good. Hey, before we go any further, I want to make sure that you are invited to come to the live meeting. The live meeting is on the first Sunday of each month at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So please join us. Now, you're going to have to adjust for whatever time zone you're in, but please join us and join in. That's a great way to ask questions, and I'm there to answer them. Also, I want to personally thank all of the patrons on Patreon for their continued financial support. Also, if you would like to become a channel member right here on YouTube, hit the join button and go through that process. It's a great way to help fund what you see here. If you don't want to do a monthly donation, that's fine. We have a thank you button. Just hit the thank you button and make a one-time donation. That is always appreciated. And let's get right back to it. Now, one of the good ways to really explore some of the repellents that are out there is to look into some of the more homeopathic, some of the more natural elements. Believe it or not, catnip actually is a plant that works really well getting rid of mosquitoes. It disrupts that hunting behavior that a lot of mosquitoes may have. Now, there's also citronella. There's a lot of different things that can be used to be a repellent to the mosquito, to biting insects. That's something to look into. Now, another very popular one is smoke. So if you have a campfire, the smoke can actually be a deterrent to biting insects. The flying insects, the smoke can actually disorient them, and that breaks that pattern, that hunting pattern that mosquitoes will have. And with all the other things that we've put into keeping our scouts from being the next meal, the smoke might help as far as being a deterrent. That is something to think about. But you have to make sure that that smoke is not overly used. You want to keep it to a minimum if you can. Campfires are wonderful. Smoky ones are great. They keep the bugs flying on you. But you also have to keep in mind that we're dealing with young people, and the smoke may not be the best thing. The small amounts, no problem. But when you have huge amounts of smoke, and that's not good. Sometimes that could actually get the rangers notified, and they're looking for forest fires. So a huge amount of smoke all of a sudden coming out of the woods, that's not a good thing. So you have to use that and keep it in a balance. Now, when I was a youth, we would put fire cans, which were just paint cans, on little hooks by each tent. That's fine. That's a very wise thing to have because tents go up very quick. So having that as a way of mitigating a lot of the fire hazard, having those buckets, but you have to replace that water every day because mosquitoes, because it's standing water, will lay eggs in there. So you have to replace that water every day. So if you have standing water, say for instance you're in a campsite for 7 days, you don't want to fill that bucket next to the buckets, fire buckets next to the fire ring. You don't want to fill them with water and never replace that water. That's not good. Or if you get there and the water's already there, that's not good. You need to replace that water every day. So any standing water is like that. And within a campsite, if you can decrease the amount of those areas where mosquitoes will actually set up house and keep that at a minimum, that's good. You want to keep them away from your camping area. inevitably your scouts and scouters are going to get bit by a mosquito. Provided that there's no severe reaction, definitely clean the area. Make sure that you use like an antihistamine or a cream, an ointment that's meant for those kinds of bites. That will decrease the amount of irritation and therefore no scratching. So that's an important first aid tip as far as that. Now, typically that type of treatment is done by Nurse Betty for the scouts, and for the scouters, they do it on their own. So that's that's usually in your first aid kit that you bring to camp. Make sure that you have some of those, hydrochlorosum cream and all the different stuff that you use for bug bites. Those things should be in there. But if it gets worse, for instance, if it starts to bubble up, if you start getting symptoms, you need to get treatment as soon as possible. So you need somebody, an expert that's in the field of medicine, to actually look at that. So that's important. Make sure if you've been bit by mosquitoes in the past and have had problems, make sure that your Nurse Betty or Nurse Ratchet or Sawbones, whatever they want to call, knows that that's going on. The medical officer of your unit needs to know, and that way, if you do get bug bites, then they can take appropriate action. Always consider some of the environmental elements of flying, biting insects like mosquitoes. That is a food source, as I said earlier. And we need to be responsible in how we react to that. Remember, leave no trace is also mosquitoes. We may dread the mosquitoes that infest the nightmare campouts. So we dread them. But, that's a food source for animals that live in that area. And that is the key. We want to make sure that we don't have them breeding in our campsite or near our campsite. We need to choose the right campsite. We need to mitigate biting. We need to do a lot of stuff so that doesn't become the focus of your camping trip. You do not want that. You try to mitigate that as much as you possibly can. But always keep that in mind, that the environmental impact of you being in their home, that's a serious thing to think about. There shouldn't be something that's long-term that's affecting the population of the mosquitoes, because that is not a good thing. If you kill off all the mosquitoes, pretty soon you have a lot of livestock and animals that no longer exist, because that is a food source. It may not be their primary, it might be a secondary, it might be something that their food actually eats. So, it's a chain reaction. And that is very important to understand as scout leaders, to make our scouts understand that everything in this world has a place, including the mosquito. So, and I hope you don't have one floating around like I do. That is just a matter of time. So, but we do a lot of work for our scouts, and this is just one more thing that we need to do to make sure that they understand mosquito management is important. They can ruin a whole campout. So, but we need to keep it all within reason. Okay, that's very, very important to understand that, and to make sure that our youth understand it. Really critical information. So as far as that goes, I'm thankful that you are in scouting and you are there learning about this, and are going to do something about it, and really help our scouts enjoy better experiences and better adventures out there. So I'm so proud of you and so thankful for your participation in scouting. It is a wonderful thing. We do so much in scouting, we need to keep it up. So until next time, hey, check out videos over here. They'll give you more information, and I will see you on the trail.